So Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, or LinkedIn or whatever. And then the next level is LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
so an important tip is if you want a job, make sure you fill in LinkedIn, make sure you're findable.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Bioinformatics Lab podcast. I am Kevin Libwitt with Andrew Page, and today we're continuing the conversation on the job market, how to access it, how to land a gig, what it looks like on the recruitment side and everything. On the last episode, we kind of gave a little bit of our perspectives of what it looked like when we were coming out of school looking for positions. And I guess to summarize that, we leaned on our professional networks. And that is the reality of job hunts, and what it looks like sometimes is leaning on the professional community that you create over your time in the field. And today we can give a little bit of perspective of what it looks like on our end when we are actively recruiting or actively searching for talent, of which we're in that phase currently, where again, let everyone know we are actively looking for talent, and give our perspective of what are the key variables we're considering even when we're just doing an initial screen. How do we find talent? How do we reach out to people, and all the rest? And so, Andrew, you and I have been doing this. We've been digging in this exact topic for at least a couple of weeks, and we've had experience previous to this in the past. So where does your head go whenever it's like, all right, we obviously have a position we need to fill, let's go find talent? What's your first steps you're taking there?
First thing I do is, do I know someone? And the reason for that is those are the most successful hires. If you know someone or it's a friend of a friend, those usually work out much better because people aren't going to recommend, people who aren't the best in the world. And so it's, mining your initial, very close network. Or it might be, someone and they have a student and they recommend the student and they're quite promising and whatever. So that's where I go to first, racking my brains. Who would I personally love to work with? And sometimes you can get them.
And you said two things there. One, it's like who, or at least I heard two different aspects there. Well, who is currently open for work, and that I know that I could tag and ping as someone who can fill the position. But then you said the recommendation thing. Like at this point too in our careers, we know people who have employed or worked with students that are also in the field. So that sort of expands our network quite extensively, by really from that second degree of connection, where it's like, okay, now I know this person who's running a lab, who's had multiple PhD students come from. I'm not just asking him for, hey, are you available for it, but rather, hey, do you have any previous students or current students that are looking for work in the next couple of months or so that you would recommend? Because those are just as powerful, because you come with some sort of just pre-screen to some extent of the validity of their work. You have someone who could speak on their behalf. It's a reference, really, that
Yeah.
you're working with. And that's often certainly where most people would go first, because there's that layer of assurance, at least at some degree. You can never predict with 100%, but it gives you some layer of like assurance. Okay, somebody that I trust is indicating that this person would be a good hire.
And then the next layer would be looking at, I guess, the specialist networks. So looking at Slack, who's active and who's helpful in the community. These are the kind of people that we might want to hire. Like they're demonstrating their knowledge to a small private group of people. And it's like, well, actually, yeah, they've answered this really esoteric question in quite a nice way, or they if they know that minute detail, that means that they know all of this other detail, and that puts them into a different league. What we want is the people who are truly passionate about bioinformatics, not just people who clock in, 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, but people are truly passionate about the subject, really love it, and get really nerdy into the depths of it. They want to know, why of these 5 different methods, how do they each work, and which one is the best, and which one is best in this particular condition. Some people absorb all of this knowledge, and those are the kind of people that I personally want to work with, or people who can, you give them a very small task and then they can build a nice piece of software, like on a whim. Those are the people I want, and those are the people I look out for. And it might be on social media, so Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon, or LinkedIn or whatever. And then the next level is LinkedIn. And
Yeah.
so an important tip is if you want a job, make sure you fill in LinkedIn, make sure you're findable. That's I absolutely hate when I can't find someone at all. You know that they're looking for a job, or you know that they might be open to it, and you cannot find any presence, or they have a very common name and they've no LinkedIn. It's like, oh, this is a
It's a
challenge.
layer of friction. It's an obvious layer of friction that we've come into a little bit of, like, you're seeing this someone reach out, or someone even if they are, for example, in the technical Slack channels, but then you want to see their professional history. It's just a public resume, so it just removes that layer of friction of, like, yeah, hey, here's the work I've done. It's available and out there. So that, because whenever you're on, the recruitment process, or seeking for talent, you're running through a bunch of profiles. You're running through a bunch of potential candidates and things like this. And so if there's any individual who's causing a point of friction, they're just going to get lost through that screening process. So trying to make it as easy as possible to indicate your body of work, your interests, and your career pursuit is really stand out. And then one thing you mentioned on being involved in the technical community is displaying your passion out for the field. There's also a component there where you're showing your willingness and ability to communicate with other technical practitioners, and how you communicate. That really
Yeah.
matters, especially in the company we're in. Collaboration is at the forefront of what we do. Being able to speak and even disagree tactfully and share your ideas. And if you have evidence of that, be it at speaking at a conference, asking a polite question that shows your thoughtfulness, or in the tech or digital communities, just interacting with the other practitioners in the field, that goes a long way. And I think what you'll see even in the, when I'm following the Slack community, it's a small percentage of folks who are really active and engaged in that discussion. So whenever someone new is coming in there, maybe a PhD student or otherwise, it's pretty stand out. It's recognized. And I think there's a layer there that can feel a little uneasy because you're communicating and other practitioners are watching. But I think finding comfort in that is a worthwhile skill, because yeah, you get introduced you're introducing yourself to the wider field.
And then maybe one piece of advice is that maybe try and keep your private life and your professional life slightly separate. If you God, what is the most appropriate way to say this? If you I don't know, you do Instagram and you're taking photos of, in various states of undress, maybe don't link to that from LinkedIn, which is your professional. You can do that. Just keep them separate. Yeah, it doesn't look the best, to be honest, when you're looking
Yeah,
up people. It's like, oh,
well said. And I think sometimes I see actually people outside the U.S. are a little bit better at this, of keeping it maybe under a different alias or something like that. It's just almost a little bit linked, separate. Where if you've got a private life that you don't want to be linked with your professional life, there's ways to do that. And when it comes to those kinds of different subjects, again, it adds a layer of friction towards the process. That said, if you're somebody who really wants your personal life to be associated with your personal life, of course, that's one way to do it. Just know that you're narrowing your search, which fair play to the people who care to do that. But it may add a layer of friction to that job hunt along the way, because that's
I
something people are looking at.
something that's just occurred to me is another place we should be looking for candidates is who follows us on GitHub. I mean, God, I should have realized that. Okay, I'm going to have a look now and see who is interested in what we do, because they're probably the people we want to hire.
Who's forked our repo? Yeah, who's
Yeah, yeah.
commented an issue? That's interesting. Yeah, because I think one thing you and I have been kind of joking about is now we're getting good at LinkedIn, and we're finding all these little techniques of how are we finding relevant talent in our space. And one of those ways is finding uh, people who indicate themselves as bioinformatics scientists, and then you get a huge lists. But again, I think, as we said in the past, that might indicate human genomics or cancer genomics, of which is kind of not exactly related to our field. But what I started doing is looking at the relevant posts in the pathogen genomics world, and seeing who's commented or liked or responded to that. And I'm realizing, oh, okay, these are people that are hyper specific to our niche of niche fields, that would already have an alignment and understanding of our field going in. And GitHub, like you said, that's a really great way.
Yeah, because then they're nerdy enough to have GitHub, and also they're interested in what we have written. So, it's a double win. I mean, geez, we should probably just hire them anyway. Go for it.
Just the flattery of, oh, you forked our repo.
Well,
You're a fantastic scientist.
my wife is a librarian, and I asked her last night, listen, is there any way to figure out, say, take one of my publications, figure out who cited me, and who are the people who most cite me most regularly, and then who, which of those are actually based in the Americas, in the right time zones, and also then who's early career. And she's like, I can't get you all that, but I can get you maybe this. And so she showed me these different databases like OpenAlex, where you can kind of drill down in different ways, and you can narrow down and then get kind of, I guess, lists of people and how many times they cited you, and then kind of that's the kind of pulse, the heat map. And then if I really want to, I go one step further and actually start drilling down and saying, well, who are the early career researchers who might want to maybe work with us, and who are the kind of settled people who there's no point in even going after them at all.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of information out there that's untapped, particularly for our niche, because we're in super super niche area, and if you went to a recruiter, they're not going to know. We know straight off, who the right people are, but recruiters won't.
Absolutely. And that's where often employers are leaning on first is their professional network, is their ability to screen the technical communities, the LinkedIn profiles, and all the rest. And that can be really effective. And that's how, you know, we're finding really strong talent, even over the past couple of weeks in employing this kind of strategy. In the past, when that has been a bit limited, we've gone the job posting route as well. And that's been super effective. Some of our strongest hires have been, through open public postings and seeing different applicants
Sorry.
on that front as well.
I've got to run and get the door.
Go ahead. All right, solid. We all right. um, Yeah, so we've had that experience of making public job postings, and that becomes a whole different game for the employer or the hiring managers because now it's very likely you'll get a ton of different applications, often hundreds, if not thousands, even for a field as small as ours. So then becomes the conversation of how do I identify standout applicants to this that are relevant to what we've done, and so in that I would really just give that same advice is if you're applying to an open position like that, especially if it's sort of cold and you don't know anybody on the company within the company itself, you have to make sure that you clearly indicate what your professional history is. A cover letter goes very far. And then also easy access to your professional body of work. If I always advocate, especially if you're a developer, get your GitHub on your resume so it'll
Yeah.
be quick access. I'm almost always, if it's a developer position, I'm almost always going to look for your GitHub profile just so I can see how does this person work in the community, and then from there the LinkedIn profile and all the rest. I think that's how you sort of stand out in that application process.
Absolutely. Like GitHub is so useful for getting an idea of what someone does. It's like your portfolio if you're an artist. People want to see what you do. Now, obviously, if you work in the commercial world or something like that, you're not going to necessarily be able to prove that or share it for IP reasons. But if you're working in universities or whatnot, or even if you're doing an undergraduate or master's, just to show that you know how to program and you're not that you just know the theory, but do you actually know in practice? And I personally learn a lot from looking at someone's code very quickly. You can see how they structure it, how they think. Are they quite organized and neat? Are they disorganized? And what languages do they know? That can be quite useful.
Absolutely. And I think those are the things that are become really stand out and help us identify the candidates worth interviewing for that first screen. And I feel like that's a whole nother discussion of like the interview process and what to convey along that way. But I think for now, that's a pretty good wrap up to this conversation of, again, putting yourself out there professionally, having a digital footprint of your professional body of work is very helpful when you're coming to a position and seeking a job. And yeah, again, at this point, Andrew, you and I are actively on the hunt. So if anyone sees this and is interested in positions at Thesion, please reach out. It's very likely we'll also be putting a job posting soon. So we'll link that when it's available. And yeah, I think that's what we got for now. So we'll see everyone in the next one.